Try it.
I'm scared.
Don't be silly. Coochie coochie coo. Now, wasn't that delicious?
Hey everyone, and welcome to another HOI4 modding lesson from the Iron Workshop. In this lesson, we'll be learning about arrays and how to use them in HOI4. Now, I'm going to take the unusual step of starting this lesson with a disclaimer, because it's important for me that you understand that I'm not a specialist when it comes to arrays. In fact, I'm myself still learning about them quite a bit. I'm also not a programmer. Now, arrays is something that exists in most programming languages, maybe all of them, I don't know. Again, I'm not a programmer. So if you have some programming background, you would probably know a bit more about arrays than I do. This lesson is only intended to explain how you can use array in HOI4. I'm not here to be some kind of a specialist about arrays and to claim that I know everything about them and exactly how they work. Since, as I said, I'm still learning quite a bit about them myself. So now that I got this out of the way, let's continue to the lesson. Okay, so this lesson is going to be a little bit complex. If this is your first time modding HOI4, or if you have no prior knowledge of modding HOI4 and you don't have any programming background, this lesson is probably not for you. You should probably go ahead and watch some of the basic lessons first, especially the one where I talk about scoping. That will help you quite a bit in understanding what's going on in here. But for the rest of you, these are the things that we will be talking about in this lesson. So first of all, I will do my best to explain what are arrays, and it's very important that you understand the concept before you actually start applying it in game, since from personal experience, I can tell you that it can be very frustrating when you're learning about arrays as a trial and error process and not from really understanding what they are. Next, we're going to be talking about the benefits of using arrays. So why would you want to use them at all? After that, we'll be talking about some existing in-game arrays. The game actually comes with a lot of arrays built into the game, and we will take a look at those. After that, we'll obviously talk about how you can create new arrays to serve your own purposes in the mods that you are creating. And we'll also be talking about how you can use triggers and effects with arrays. That is very important if you want to use these. And I'll also talk a bit about using temporary arrays, and we'll have some stuff in the extra syntax section as well. All right, so first of all, let's talk a bit what are arrays. I will have some visual aids during this lesson because I believe that when you can visualize these very abstract things, it really helps you much more in understanding exactly how they work. But first of all, let's talk a little bit about the basics of arrays. So arrays are containers that can hold various types of information in them. Now, specifically for HOI4 and actually all Paradox games that allow you to use arrays, they do the same things. They hold information and you can access that information, you can remove that information, you can add new information. That is basically what you can do with array. Now, you might wonder, what is this information? So this information can be all of these things. It can be countries, it can be military leaders, and it can be states. Obviously, in other Paradox games, that might be something different, but that is the case for HOI4. Basically, anything that you can scope. If you remember, I talked a bit about scoping, which is basically the concept of the game just finding something to target and then do something with that thing that it targeted on. And it can be a military leader, it can be a country, or it can be a specific state. So anything that can be scoped can be placed inside of an array. And once you have it in the array, you can do various things with it. Also, when you're creating new arrays, this is true for Hearts of Iron 4, I'm not sure how it works in other games, you are creating the new container, right? So we said that arrays are containers, so you're creating the container itself, and at the same step you're also putting something in it. So when you're creating the array, you need to create the container and specify what is it that you want to have in this container the moment that you create it. Alright, so these are the basics of arrays. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the benefits of using arrays. Why would you want to use them? So what are the benefits of using arrays? So first of all, arrays allow you to perform effects on many scopes. As I said before, these can be countries, states, or military leaders at once. That means that, for example, I'm just throwing an example out there. Let's say that I want all the countries in Europe to get a certain amount of political power. Or maybe I want all of them to suddenly break up in civil war, right? So I can either type each country individually, which will take me a long time. Second of all, is very prone to errors, right? Because typing so much, I will probably get something wrong in the code. Or I can just put all of these countries into an array and then just tell the game that all the countries that are now in this array do this effect on them, give them political power, or make them go to civil war, right? Next, arrays allow you to quickly check information on many scopes at once. So just as before, I can apply effects to these countries, but I can also check things on them. And with the information that I get, I can do various things. So if I want to know, let's say, do all the countries in Europe have a certain amount of communist ideology in them, right? Again, I can type each country individually, or I can just put them all into an array and then just do this check in one easy step. Next is that arrays can be used almost everywhere. You can use arrays in decisions, in focuses, in events, and you can also use them in scripted GUIs, which is what we'll be talking about next week. And that is a very powerful tool because it can save you a lot of time, it can save you a lot of typing and code errors, and it is really a great tool to use once you understand how you can use it. And the last thing is that arrays can be combined with other arrays. So even if I have an array, I can then do another thing and then maybe switch countries from one array to another, or I can perform one effect on these countries and then just tell the game that, okay, although I have all of these countries in one array, let's just do a certain effect on just some of them, maybe not all of them, with some specific parameters that I specify. And I'm going to give you an example. So let's say that I have an array of all countries in Europe, right? But I only want the countries that are communists to get some political power. So we have two arrays. We have the first array of the countries that are in Europe, and then I have another array, which is the countries that have a certain amount of political power, right? And and the second array is all the countries that are communist, and then I'm giving them political power and not to the other ones. Okay, so I do understand that this can be a bit mind-blowing at first, but as we see these examples in-game, I'm sure that things will clear up and you will see exactly what arrays can do for you. Alright, so now that we understand a little bit what arrays are, let's see how these things play out in the game. And the first thing that I'm going to show you is the existing arrays that are already in the game. And it's quite possible that you were using these, but maybe you didn't even realize that these are arrays. I know I didn't when I first used them. So let's go into the game. And in here, I have created some decisions to show these arrays. Now, decisions are some of the best ways to test your arrays before you implement them into a focus or an event. And I highly recommend you to create decisions such as these to test your arrays and make sure that everything works before you implement it into something more complex. So what I have here is 3 examples of arrays that are already available in the game. Now there are a lot more, but I just want to show you these basic 3 so that you understand how they function like arrays. So the first one we'll take a look at is every neighbor country. Now this is an array that basically what it does, it looks at all the neighbors of the current country, in this case the United States, and it puts them into an array. And then what I told the game in my file, if we take a look here in the file, I told the game that every country which is in this array, right, so this is an array, so every country that is in this array should get 50 political power, and as you see, if I click it, that means that countries like Canada and Mexico will get an additional 50 political power. The next array that we have is the random neighbor state array. Now this is an array that functions on states, not on countries. And just as with countries, it picks a random state, right? So a random neighboring state from this state. So any state that is neighboring this one, it puts it into this array, and then it does this effect, set demilitarized zone. And as you can see here, if I were to click this, then in this case, Pennsylvania would become a demilitarized zone. And let's take a look at another one. This one is the random country array. So what this does is that it generates an array of all the countries in the game, and then it picks up just one country from that array. And in our example, in that country, it will start a civil war, right? In this case, it will be Ecuador. So these are arrays that are already existing in the game, and you can access them pretty easily, and you can do great things with them. But obviously what we want to learn is how can I create my own array, right? Not to use something that has been pre-made by the developers, because obviously if I have a mod of my own, I can sometimes create situations that the developers did not cover. So this is what we'll be talking about in the next step, creating new arrays. All right, so let's learn how we can create new arrays. I'm still going to be using my decisions here, and I'm just going to be changing them. And with these decisions, we'll be creating our new arrays. So let me just open this file in here. I'll use the first one. And we'll be using obviously the complete effect, since that is the effect that will create our arrays. Now to create arrays, there's a very specific command in the game. I'm just going to copy it over here. Now in the description of the video, I will have a link to the page on the HOI4 wiki that has all of these commands listed, and obviously you're not expected or supposed to remember them by heart. I certainly don't. All right, so this is the basic code that we need to create a new array. And we just have to list a couple of parameters in here. So first of all, we have to give the name of the array. Now this name is the ID of the array, so that every time that I want to do something with this array, I will need to let the game know that this is the ID that I want to do something with. All right. Now, when you're naming your array, you can name it in a couple of ways. You can either name it as an array for your country specifically. So for example, if I were to name it like this, new countries array, that means that this array will be applied to the United States. This is an array that exists for the United States because we are playing the United States. Now, another array that you can create is a global array. So if I were to type in here like this, global dot new countries array, then this will be an array that all the countries in the game will have access to. Now, this goes a little bit into variable modding, and I'm not really going to go too deep on this right now because that is not the purpose of this lesson, but this will do for now. So just know that you can name your arrays with a country tag or use global, and then that determines who can access this array. So if I were to put in here, for example, USA, then obviously it will be an array that is created for the United States of America. Right, so the next thing that I need to list is the first value that I want to put into this array. As I said before, when we are creating an array in HOI4, we are creating the container, right, that contains the information inside of it. But we're also creating the first item in that container. So I need to list that in order for the game to create my array properly. So let's say that in here I want to put in another country, just as an example. And let's say that we want to put in here the Soviet Union. So I will type the tag of the Soviet Union, and then the dot, and then ID. So what this will do, it will put the tag of the Soviet Union into this array, into this container, and then every time that I'm checking or doing something with this array, then things will be done for the Soviet Union because they are in that array, right? Now, the third value is the index. Now, I really don't want to go too in depth into this because in, let's say, most cases you will not be using this and you don't really need to use it, but you should be familiar with why it's there. Now, arrays arrange their items in an order, right? So the first item gets an index, so that is the number, the location of that item in the array. And the first index is always 0. It's not 1, it's 0, okay? Now this has some possible applications and benefits that you can use. For example, if you have a very static array and you know that a certain particular country is in index 0 or in index 5, then you can access that country directly. But as I said, in most cases, you will not need to use this parameter, so you can just remove it, and this will be enough. So the array will be created just with the name, the ID of the array, and the first value that you're putting into this array. Now, the interesting thing about it is that this code, the add to array code, is not a code that has any kind of localization for it. And what this means is that when you hover over the decision in here, you will not see any kind of indication that the game is actually doing this. And that is totally okay. That is not because you did something wrong. That is just code that is not being displayed to the player, just like country flags, for example, right? So if I were to click right now, you can be sure that the Soviet Union would be added into the array, but there is no indication of it in the decision itself. But don't worry, once we start applying the effect, you will see that it is truly in the array. Now, you might ask yourself, okay, so let's say that I have my first value in the array, but what if I want to add another one? So you can totally do that. You will just need to duplicate this line. So for example, let's say that I want to add Germany and the Soviet Union. So I just add another line and I put the tag of Germany into my array, and so on and so forth. Doesn't really matter how many countries I want to add. All right, so that is how we are creating a new array in the game. Now I totally understand that at this point it's like, all right, so what actually happened? I don't see any change. We'll get to that in a moment. Don't worry, you will see that arrays can have amazing effects in the game. All right, so that is all you need to know about creating new arrays. Now let's proceed to the next step using triggers and effects with our arrays that we've created. Okay, so after we've created our array, let's see how we can apply effects to the array. So I'm going to be using my second decision that I have in here. And we're again going to be using the complete effect. And what we'll be doing here, we'll be combining two arrays together. So the first one is going to be every country, right? So every country is an existing array in the game already. Limit. So from the array of every country in the game, I want the game to limit it to very specific countries. And in here, I will need the trigger to limit my effects only to the countries that are in this array. And there's a special code for that. So let me just copy it in here. Okay, so limit is in array. Now we need the name of the array. Value. So the value is what is the value that is in the array. Now previously you've seen that I've put the Soviet tag into the array. So what I'm going to do in here, I'm just going to type this ID. So why am I typing this? So the game goes over here, it looks at the array of every country in the game, then it goes to this line and it says, okay, there's a limiter here, so I'm not supposed to target all the countries in the game. Let's see, who am I supposed to target? Okay, I'm supposed to target only countries that are in this array. Cool. And what is the value that I'm looking for? Okay, I'm looking for the ID or the tag of the country that is in the array, right? So when it goes over an array, it looks at every country, and so it says like, okay, there's a country here, it's the Soviet Union. What is the value? Soviet.id. Excellent. So that is a country that I need to apply an effect to. The next one and the next one and so forth. Obviously in this array we only have the Soviet Union, so it stops after it locates the Soviet Union in the array. And let's have the Soviet Union start a civil war, because that is actually the most visible effect that we can currently have in the game. So let's start with a democratic civil war in the Soviet Union. And let's take a look at our decision. And you see now that it says Soviet Union, the democratic supporters start a civil war. That is it. We now know that the Soviet Union is indeed in the array because that is what the code tells it to do. But now let's try a more broad example, right? Because as I said, one of the benefits of using arrays is that we can apply effects to many countries in the game. So let's go a bit crazy with this. What I want to do now, I want to create a new array. So in here, I'm going to type the following. Let's call it new civil war countries, right? And in here, I'm going to do this. The reason that I'm changing it to this ID is because I'm going to once again combine two arrays together. So I'm going to tell the game every country, limit, capital scope. So it's going to look at the capital of the country, is on continent South America. And I'm just going to put this inside of this limiter. Sorry, inside of this every country array. And it's going to add every country that is on the continent South America into our new array of civil countries war. Excellent. And what I'm going to do from here, I'm going to tell the game that after it adds all of these countries, I want all of these countries to have a civil war. So first of all, let's click our new decision in here, make sure that the array is created. And let's just change this a little bit. So every country that is in this array, right, we have a new array. Start civil war, democratic. So let's save it. And let's see what the tooltip says now. All right, so now you see that Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, and 16 other countries are going to have a civil war starting at once. So you can clearly see the difference between doing it like this or going like this. Brazil, start civil war, blah, 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 blah. Argentina, start civil war, blah, 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 right? This could take me hours, and so many mistakes can be made while I'm typing all of this text. Arrays can save all of this time and make things really, really much more simple. And as you have seen, we have used some new triggers in here when we were creating our arrays. So we were limiting the countries that are going into the array, into the container, by their location on the continent. So only the countries that are in South America went into this array. Other countries were excluded, despite the fact that the first array was targeting every country in the game. All right, so I know that this is a little bit intense. I hope you got most of this, but now let us try to proceed to the next step, which is using temporary arrays, and that is a very cool feature that I want you to know about as well. Okay, let's talk a little bit about using temporary arrays. So temporary arrays are a good thing to use when you want to put a bunch of countries into an array, apply an effect to them or check something about them, and then just forget about it, right? Because every array that you create will remain in the game unless you clear the array. And that can sometimes be a problem because of performance issues if you have a lot of arrays with countries in them. And maybe you want to have some kind of a quick effect without bothering with the removal of the array. So in these cases, the temporary arrays are the solution. So let's just take a look at this decision here and see what we can do here. So here, instead of add to array, I can type add to temporary array. And that means that the game will create a temporary array with this name and with the value of these countries that have their capitals in South America. And once this whole block of complete effect is done executing, the array will delete itself and will no longer be in the game. So let's just take this code from here and just apply it here. So we have the countries added to an array, and now I just want to do an effect on them. So I'm going to once again limit. I'm going to ask if they are in an array. All right, so this is our array. And we want a civil war to start, just like this. Now, when using temporary arrays with decisions, you will notice that when I hover my icon over here, it doesn't really show the effect just yet. And that has to do with the nature of temporary arrays. Because this array has not been created yet, then the game doesn't really know how to display the effect properly. But if I were to click it, you see that suddenly all of these countries are now at civil war, right? And the array is gone, it has been deleted, it is no longer in the game because it was a temporary array. Now, you might ask yourself, how do I remove a country from an array? So the syntax is very similar to add to array. So you can just type it like this, remove from array. Obviously you need the ID, the name of the array, the value that you want to remove, and that's it. Your value is removed from the array, so very simple. Now we'll be talking about clearing array in the extra syntax portion of this video. And that is basically all you need to know about using arrays. Now we will be using arrays in the scripted GUIs lesson as well. So it was very important for me to show you what are arrays and how they work. Now arrays can be more complex and there are actually more aspects to arrays, but I just wanted to stick to the things that I'm completely confident in and that I know how to use properly. As I said at the beginning of the video, I'm not a pro when it comes to arrays. There are still things that I don't completely understand. So if you have any knowledge to contribute, you're welcome to do so in the comments to this video. I will appreciate that quite a bit, and I'm sure that other people who are watching this video will appreciate it as well. For those of you who are sticking around, I will see you in the extra syntax section in a minute. For those of you who are burning to try arrays, I wish you good luck. I hope everything works out. If it does not, post your problems or issues in the comments and I will do my best to help you. Thank you for watching this video. Welcome to the extra syntax section of this video. And in the extra syntax, I want to talk about two things that really helped me when I was working with arrays, and no doubt things that you will encounter when you're working with arrays. So the first thing is that you might want to create some localization for your arrays, right? So let's say that you've added some countries to an array, and you now want to create localization to show the player the countries that are in this array. Now there's a separate thing to do this for scripted GUIs, and I will explain how to do that in the scripted GUIs lesson. And there's a separate way to do this for decisions, focuses, whatever. So we are going to be focusing on the second part, right? So I have these decisions in here. And let's say that in the name of the decision, I want to show the names of the countries that are in this array, right? So how I can do that? First of all, I have created this localization file here, and I'm just going to type the name of this decision. Let's just see if it works. Sorry. Let's see if it shows up. Ah, yes, of course, it's not showing up because I do not have the L English in the name. Okay, so we have our localization showing up, but as I said, I want to list the names of the countries that are in the array in here in the name. So how I can do that? So we'll need the array name. First of all, let's create it. So I'm going to click this decision, and now we have created this array, and I'm going to copy it over to the localization entry. And in here, I'm going to type the following. I'm going to open new square brackets. I'm going to type the name of the array. I'll start it with a question mark. And then I'm going to put the position of the entry that I want to localize, right? So as I said before, every item in the array has its own index, its position. So in this case, I want the game to list the country that is in the first position, and the first position is always 0. So let's just save that and see if it shows up. Okay, so it's showing me some kind of a weird text, and that means that something isn't working. Let's just see what I forgot in here. Okay, right, so let's, right, I do want to get a name of that country. Okay, so we have Argentina now. So Argentina is the first country that we have in our array. And obviously, if I want to localize more countries that are in the array, I will just have to change the position. So if I put 1, we now see that we have Argentina. Let's just make it more clear. And we have Bolivia. These are countries that are now in this array. Now, I do have to warn you that this technique is a bit problematic when countries are not in the array. So, for example, if I reload my game, let me just start as the United States again. Right, so I have reloaded my game, and this array has not been created yet, right? So it's empty. But the localization script is always running in the background, so it is constantly searching for these countries in the array. And that can lead to this very strange situation where you have these endless errors generating here in the bottom corner of the screen. So you need to make sure that the countries that you are localizing for are in an array. That can be done with an on effect at the startup of the game, and there are other ways to do this as well. I'm sure you will find plenty of ways to solve this issue as you continue to work with arrays. Now, another thing that I want to show you when working with arrays is how you can actually check if a country is indeed present in an array, because maybe something has happened and you clicked a button that's supposed to add countries into an array, but that did not happen. So there's a console command that can help you get that. Now, this has something to do with variables again, but I will make it as simple as possible. So you just need to open the console, type the following, get var. Then you need to type the name of the array. So in this case, this is the name. You can just copy paste from Notepad++. And then get the index where you know that the country is supposed to be at. So let's say it's supposed to be at 1 or 2. And then it will tell you which item is in the index of that array. Now I'm saying again, this can be a country or a state or a country leader, whatever. In this case, obviously it's countries. And obviously if I were to change this, we will get more and more countries that were added from South America. Now, if you are checking for an array of another country, it's very important that you type the tag of that country that you're checking for. Otherwise, it may give you empty results. For example, yeah, now it's working perfectly, of course. But in some cases, it may give you the wrong result, despite the fact that the country maybe is indeed in the array. All right, so that is how you can debug arrays a little bit. Now, as I said at the beginning of this video, arrays can be much more complex. There are still things about arrays that I don't understand fully, so I don't want to go into them without truly understanding what I'm talking about. However, this is a very powerful tool that can really help you once you understand it and once you play around with it and you know how to use it for your advantage. Hopefully this lesson helped you. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one on the Iron Workshop. Bye bye. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, give it a like. The algorithm and me will be very happy. Here are more videos I make. If you like my stuff, consider subscribing to be notified when new content is available. The Iron Workshop lives and thrives thanks to the continued support of my Patreons. If you're willing and able, you can support me on Patreon for just $1 and get access to exclusive and early content. See you around.